Good morning and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix, broadcasting to you live from Austin, Texas, as I do 5 days a week here on Spreaker, and right after that over on YouTube. I got plans, I got big plans. We're going to start to multicast this very quickly in the not too distant future. Hopefully before Mercury retrograde, which is coming up on the 3rd of December. Mark that on your calendar. Mark that day in your calendar. Little Mercury retrogradism. We'll get through it. We always do. It's always an interesting time. And in Sagittarius, it is the truths. 29 degrees Sagittarius. The truths that have been left untold. That's right. Going back, way back. Back in the time. How is everybody today? Do we have all of our atoms and molecules assembled together? Are we in coherence? Check. Coherence. John Trudell, the late John Trudell, used to talk about coherence a lot. Coherent. Coherent and clear. Coherent. I love John. I miss John. John is one of the great extemporaneous tellers of truth of all time, and John was an activist. I had him on my radio show a couple times, and got to meet him a few times. And he was one of these guys who's definitely kind of a coyote figure, because on the one hand he could be kind of very laconic and didn't always seem at times to be entirely motivated, and other times he would be absolutely electric. So if you caught John on the right day, it was quite something to see. And I always enjoyed watching him perform live with his band. He had quite a bit of charisma. And what he would talk about is being coherent and clear. And if you were coherent and clear, then you could make good decisions. This was the operating principle, coherent and clear. Now, somebody could say, well, being coherent and clear is a tool that an atheist would use, or that's a satanic strategy. They're coherent, they're clear, they know what they want, they're going to go out and get it. That's coherence, that's clarity, that's true. That's true. It's not like there's a patent on this thing, right? So, if you can apply coherence and clarity to your own life in your own way through your own lens of perception, it can be a very useful tool. So I hope everybody is in coherence. Are we in coherence? Yes. Not compliance, coherence. And are we clear? As clear as we can be. Well, there's some interesting things going on, as there always are. I guess we can punch up another casualty in the escalating numbers of men who have had some form of indiscretion in their past, and boom, Matt Lauer woke up this morning, and they did not waste any time removing Matt Lauer. I don't know. I don't have a lot of love lost for Matt Lauer. I think he's an industry insider and a high-level puppet and tool, which most of them are at that level, whether they know it or not, and I'm sure most of them know it. They'd have to know it, or they would play by some blissfully unaware rules of engagement, which allows them to continue to broadcast and comment upon the greatest illusion of all time, meaning existence on planet Earth. So I don't have any love lost for Matt Lauer. to be honest with you. There were rumors for years that he was a rampant womanizer and a coke user, and but does that really matter? I mean, they all do it. It's all being done at that level, pretty much. And if you're not doing it, then you're kind of on the rings of Saturn. Right? Like I think of a guy like Bill Moyers that everybody respects. Oh, Bill Moyers. Oh, Bill Moyers. He interviewed Joseph Campbell. Oh, Bill Moyers. Bill Moyers was not in the mainstream of the media, and he probably has very few skeletons in his closet, and he's broadcasting from the rings of Saturn. I don't think he's broadcasting anymore, but that was where Bill Moyers was relegated to. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you're in the heart of the beast, you're compromised and you're playing by the beast rules, and that's just the way it is. And Matt Lauer is a casualty. He's a casualty of the beast system, and I'm sure he's got a lot of skeletons in his closet. But who doesn't? We've all got skeletons. I'm sorry if you don't have skeletons. And I said this before, you're a monk. And even if you're a monk, there's probably a good chance you've got skeletons. This is the nature of the world. The nature of the world. But what was really fascinating about the Matt Lauer piece was how quickly it happened. I mean, it was like overnight. Like NBC wasted no time. They got an email or a letter from somebody who Matt Lauer had put the moves on, and boom, done. They didn't wait at all. I'm sure Matt Lauer probably got a phone call in the middle of the night. I bet you this is what happened. He got a phone call in the middle of the night, and the phone call was, Matt, don't come to the studio tomorrow. You're fired. Could you imagine waking up to that? Like, you're sleeping, and I know he probably goes to bed pretty early because he had to get up pretty early. You're sleeping, and all of a sudden, the phone rings, and it's answered. And it's probably his agent, right? It's probably coming through his agent. They wouldn't talk to Matt directly. They would deal with his agent. And then he gets a call from his agent, Matt, don't go to work tomorrow. NBC is firing you. You're done. Could you imagine waking up to that? Holy shit. And again, I don't really have any love lost for Matt Lauer, but I'm just thinking about it from the human perspective. Then all of a sudden, you're just done. This torpedo has come into your life, and you're done. Wasted no time. None at all. So there's no due process. There's no way, unless you're Al Franken. Apparently there's plenty of due process for Al Franken because he has plenty of supporters. Or John Conyers. This John Conyers thing is blowing up in a big way. It's huge. This woman today yesterday talking about John Conyers and how his hands were all over her and, oh yeah, ha ha ha, don't get in an elevator alone with John Conyers. Ha ha ha, jokey jokey joke. John Conyers likes to walk around in his underwear. Everybody knew it. It's like, how long is John Conyers going to stick around on that nice... He's been around for a long time. He's been around for... And John Conyers had done some interesting things at times. He'd looked into some interesting things. He kind of stood up for a few things every now and then. But again, the track record is spotty at best. And these people are career reptilians. And there should be term limits without any equivocation. People should spend no more than 2 consecutive terms in office. Boom, done, end of story. Senate and Congress, 2 consecutive terms. That's it. You spend your 2 terms, you're done. Maybe 3 at the most. 3 is a magic number. Make it 3. Why not? Make it 3. What's 2? It's a 2-year cycle, right? Midterm elections every 2 years, correct? Yeah. So make it 3. 6 years, you're done. And then you don't get all the perks either when you're done. They get huge perks. Slash the perks in half. Let's see who runs. Make it less attractive. Make it more about service and less about. God, you know how much money some of these people make? It's incredible. It's totally incredible. Let's just do this. Hold on. I'm freelancing right now, which is what I usually do, but let's do this. Because I want to get this right. Okay, here we go. Do you know how much Susan Rice is worth? So her salary is $172,000 a year, which is a pretty good salary. In Washington, D.C., it's not very good. Washington, D.C. has displaced Silicon Valley as the most wealthy zip code in the country in terms of net worth. So and there's a reason why for that. So $172,000 a year in Washington, D.C. is like getting by money. It costs a lot of money to live there. I'm sure with her government credentials, she has an expense account. Or, I'm sure she's got perks on top of the 172. Okay, she's worth $50 million. She's worth $50 million. The 30% tax rate is $120,000. That's after taxes. She's worth $50 million. Did you think that she went in there with $50 million? The answer is a big fat no. This is why people get into politics. It's not, some people get in because they have this desire to sort of stand up for the little guy, or they have this innate sense that they want to give back. They've been successful in business. And it's like, hey, I've been a big deal in business and I'm going to give back now. This might have been Trump's motivation. We'll put that in parentheses, might have, or quotes, might have. But there is another motivation. The motivation is, these are really good gigs. You make a lot of money. And it's not the money that you make from the job. It's the money you make from the connections that are around you 24/7, and that they want you to be successful, and they want to line your pockets because you'll be beholden to them. And a lot of you may know this because you're a smart bunch. Some of you may not, but in Washington, D.C., you get to practice insider trading. This is a fact. You can look it up. This is a fact. So if you get a hot stock tip, and a company is going to be purchased, and their stock is going to maybe double and split as part of the purchase, you're buying stock. At that point, you're buying it. And why wouldn't you in some ways, right? I get that there would be a sense of purity, wanting to retain the purity. You don't want to do that. And, there are people that would probably do that. There are other people like, well, geez, this person's going to buy this. They're going to get this deal. And they're going to have this money. And they're going to have this power and this influence. And I'll have less of it. And, that's kind of trap thinking, to be honest with you. But this is the world that we live in. The more resources that you have, the more that you have in your war chest, the more options you have, and the more kind of lateral mobility, upward lateral mobility, whatever. Insider trading, they get to have it. And Susan Rice worth $50 million. $50 million on a $170,000 salary. Anyway. So Matt Lauer is gone, done for the count. It's a time where these allegations and the process around the allegation is shocking. And I talked about this on the Sunday night show. In case you missed it, this is the advent of the all-seeing eye. And the all-seeing eye that is omniscient, and the all-seeing eye that is not anchored in any place in time. Okay? It's not. It's not about what you're doing now or what you did today or yesterday or even last week, but what you did 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And not only that, but it's what you might do in the future, which we have not yet gotten to, but we will. That aspect is coming. If you are determined based on a certain pattern of behavior, that has been displayed in the past. You will be targeted at some point in the future as a potential target for mind crime. A perp. That was the word I was looking for. A potential perp for mind crime. Do you think I'm kidding? No. Because this is the synthetic manifestation of God. This is the synthetic manifestation of God. This is the all-seeing eye. The all-seeing eye that is everywhere. In your past, in your present. It knows no demarcation between time and space. It can go back 25 years. It could go back 3 generations. Let's say you've got an ancestor who is a dubious character. 3 generations ago. It's a stain. It besmirches who you are. You think that's out of the realm of possibility? Not at all. They tried to pin that on Trump's grandfather. He's a KKK member. So you see where this is? The all-seeing eye is everywhere, and it knows no demarcation between space and time. Clearly, the past is really open season right now. It's open season on the past. And when we get into Saturn and Capricorn, it will be open season on the future. Because Capricorn is always looking towards the future. It has the ability to go back and forth through time because Capricorn rules time. Cancer is usually what we think about when we think about the past. And generally in good terms. It's nostalgic. That's the nature of Cancer. It's nostalgic. Oh, remember when? Remember when? Well, sometimes the remember when is really not a bad thing. And other times it's a soporific. Just chop up that red pill and do a line. That's all you got to do. Get present. So this is where this is headed. It's headed, Saturn and Capricorn, it's headed to the future. It's like, what will you do? What can you do? Right? And this kind of leads us into our next topic of conversation of today, which I wanted to bring to your attention. It occurred to me. I was going through the various media channels and looking through various news sources. And one of the things that Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground, you should actually, if you have any time, study Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground, because they are the template for the time. They're the template for the time. While Barack Obama was in office, Bill Ayers must have visited the White House like over 250 times. And Ayers, of course, was you go to Snopes and they'll say, no, this is not true. But Bill Ayers co-wrote Barack Obama's first book, Dreams of My Father. And Bill Ayers was Barack Obama's mentor. And I've told the story before about the mailman who used to deliver mail to the Ayers residence in Chicago. And Ayers' mom would brag about Obama, who was at that time a college student, and how he was going to be president of the United States. And the postman there had a few conversations with old man Ayers, who was a utility titan and a lot of money. Bill Ayers' dad was a utility titan. I think it was like Chicago Power or one of those utility companies. He was like on the board. He had bucks. The Ayers had a good life. And so he would kind of hassle his postman about, aren't you pissed off for working for the man? What about your working conditions? Trying to get under his skin about being a plebe. And the postman didn't have he wanted nothing to do with this agitator, old man Ayers, the agitator. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So Bill Ayers was Barack Obama's mentor in Chicago. Bill Ayers was a full-blown terrorist. He was a domestic terrorist. Now, in the United States in the 1960s was a bit harsh because we have to contextualize this. There was a war going on that was set in place to basically divide the country. There were many things about the Vietnam War, one of which was to control the heroin trade coming from the Golden Triangle. I think that's first and foremost one of the reasons why we went into Vietnam. Another reason why the Vietnam War existed was because, of course, the military-industrial complex made a lot of money. We got to, we had to make all these weapons and use them and fire off a bunch of bullets and missiles and hand grenades and rocket launchers and all the stuff, right? Well, guess what? The North Vietnamese had to get weapons too. Where do you think the North Vietnamese got their weapons from? They got them from Russia. It's proven. Russia and China, mostly Russia. And who did Russia buy those parts from to make those weapons? The United States. So it was the military-industrial complex company selling the parts, the arms parts to the Russians. And they did this during the Korean War as well. So they're making money both ways. So in essence, we're fighting ourselves, right? Another reason why the Vietnam War existed was from a social perspective is that it fractured the entire country. And when the Vietnam War first began, it was a war that was being opposed by professors on college campuses. These people were lucid, they were erudites, they came from a pacifist tradition. Some of them might have been in a previous war, World War I or World War II. Some of them may have had no experience or exposure to war at all. But this was the first line of resistance during the 1960s in the Vietnam War. Quickly, very quickly, that line of resistance was infiltrated. And what did we have? We had SDS, we had the Weather Underground, we had the Yippies, to some extent we had the Black Panthers, and a number of smaller groups, most of which were organized under the aegis of the Communist Party. Because the Communist Party wanted to take advantage of the fact that we had a war. And not only that, but there are elements inside of our own government that wanted to take advantage of that as well. Because a divided populace is an easily conquered and led populace. And the Vietnam War was the biggest wedge to hit this country in its history since the Civil War. And in essence, the Vietnam War was a civil war. We were fighting a civil war inside of the United States of America at that time. And that civil war was led by Bill Ayers and Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and the rest of the radical kamikazes who firmly believed that they were doing a service to the world. They firmly believed that if they could escalate their level of radical terror, that they would start a revolution, and the revolution would topple the imperialist state of the United States of America. And they firmly believed that. And the Vietnam War was their fulcrum. However, it was not their only radical plank. They were also very engaged in hostilities towards police. And they called them pigs. There's an interesting white paper that you can get. Hold on a second. Why does this happen to my computer sometimes? Here we go. Just all of a sudden I get windows that close. It's just like, come on, man. So you can get the white paper from online. It's called Archive Stream. Archive.org/stream. I'll put this on the YouTube page. It's basically the Weather Underground's manifesto, and you can get it. It's easy to find. Anyway, they were engaged. If you look at their manifesto, they use the word pig over and over again, over and over and over again. So when we see, and by the way, they talk very openly in this manifesto about engaging Black America. And during that time, in the 1960s, they were very keen on forging bonds with the Black Panther movement, which had been infiltrated by COINTELPRO, and maybe even the Weather Underground might have been infiltrated as well. This has been going on for a long time. But if you look into their history, you look into the white paper or their manifesto, you'll see that this is a big thing, that they wanted to piggyback not just on the discord of the war, the Vietnam War, which gave them their access to their socialist Marxist rhetoric and and fighting the fight against imperialist forces abroad. And then domestically, it was the war on poverty and inequality and engaging the black community as part of their struggle. Now, during the Obama administration, especially during the last 4 years of the Obama administration, we saw this. We saw the rise of Black Lives Matter. We saw the resurgence of the racial conflict that was stoked and fired, and having kerosene tossed onto it. And I would guarantee you that Bill Ayers had a role to play in that, because it's coming right out of the past. You can go look at the manifesto for the Weather Underground. I don't think there's any mistake. So what I'm trying to establish here is that there was a plan in place through the Weather Underground. And then what happened is that some of the people in the Weather Underground kind of forked off and began to live their lives, whatever they were. And others stayed engaged in the quote-unquote struggle or fight, including Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, who is his wife. And Bill Ayers decided that he was going to put on a suit and a tie. He's a Capricorn, by the way. Put on a suit and a tie and get involved in education. While it's at times difficult to trace the source of Common Core, there are many people who believe that Bill Ayers is the architect of Common Core. This guy has really influenced American culture in a radical fashion, in ways that we can't even begin to comprehend. He's still out there. He's still kicking. You know, Andrew Breitbart had dinner with Bill Ayers just before he died. It was one of his final meals. He went and had dinner at Bill Ayers' very nice little condo there in Chicago. Him and Bill and Bernadine. You can look that up online. He actually wrote about it, Breitbart. So one of the things that Ayers and the Weather Underground envisioned as part of their grand plan was that there were Americans that would either have to be re-educated or die. Because they said, okay, well, you know, they're either going to be turned around and they're going to have their consciousness wiped and disabuse themselves of any notion of individuality, individualism, capitalism, Americanism, anything that even remotely is connected to that wave and cycle of history, or they're going to get killed. We'll take them out and we'll kill them. And that's the truth. And they said, we have no problem killing 5 million people. That's how coldly calculated and dedicated these people were to their cause. So during the Obama administration, people thought, wow, okay, we've got these FEMA camps. The FEMA camps are going to be the re-education centers. Of course, Ayers was there, elbow to elbow with Obama. And it was a fear. It was one of these existential fears that people were, you know, every time they would see, you know, Operation Jade Helm or anything that remotely smacked of, okay, we're going to start moving people around, people just get a sniff of that and they go in and try to expose it and bring it out. And in many cases, nothing ever really happened. Although I'm sure they got a lot of information out of announcing that it would happen or leaking that it would happen and going through the motions that it would happen. They got a lot of information out of that. But what I'm going to throw out there today is that the re-education centers are here. And they're right under our noses, and they've been here for a very long time. And I'm talking about our college universities. And what's becoming very transparent now, because if you look at the vector of the college university experience. And what is trendy, or what is being taught, has been taught for the last 35 years, is a curriculum of mostly socialist Marxist ideology. Mostly. And if you go in a different path or in a different direction, you had to really face the fire. You had to have your feet held to the fire. Most professors wouldn't reward papers that gave an alternative point of view in terms of economy, in terms of social engineering, in terms of the development of the individual and the self. If you moved along certain lines, you were rewarded. If you bucked the trend and had a different point of view, you were an outcast, and you had to work twice as hard in order to get a grade or to move forward while everybody else is swimming with the current or swimming with the tide. You had to swim against it. Now, this in and of itself is a form of programming, not the actual material. The material may be immaterial, but it's this idea that you're going to go along with the program because you're going to get rewarded. If the majority of the people on a college campus say that, Marcuse is great, or Derrida is great. Oh, I love Nietzsche. If you go along those lines, and maybe somewhere along the way, you discover that you've got an inner feminist, the next thing you know, life gets real easy. You get rewarded. Great paper. Way to go. I love your thesis. I love your critical and unflinching self-examination about where you came from, your place in history and your culture. You're brave. Move on. This is what happens. And it's like, oh, that felt really good. I got an A. Ooh. And so you move along the current. You swim with the current. And then you get shot out and you're in the world. And what are you doing? You're swimming with the current. You're swimming with the trend. You're swimming with the tide. Because you got set up at a certain point in your life that conforming and saying yes to the program that was being offered up to you would be rewarded. And that ultimate reward would be the thing that would get you perhaps a job, money. This is especially true in the realm of research and science. Buck the trend in science. Let's say you're a cancer researcher and you're a really, really eager, enthusiastic, idealistic. And this is the great thing about youth. Youth has idealism. It's like, man, I got all these endorphins and hormones and chemicals shooting through my body. I'm alive. And I want to see the world to be a better place. I haven't been knocked down a few pegs yet. Hopefully. You know, I have the ability to make a difference. So let's say they do that. They go into, and I want to do it with medical research. My grandmother had cancer. And she died. And it was a very sad thing for me. So from this day forward, I want to dedicate my life to defeating cancer. And so you go into the program, and next thing you know, you stumble upon something. You know, there's a whole field of evidence that cancer is a fungus. That this is a fungus. Why aren't we treating this like a fungus? And then you go to somebody who's like your professor or your research head, and you say, hey, I just found this really interesting information about cancer as a fungus. And they'll look at you and they'll say, that's blasphemy. There's no way that cancer is a fungus. That material is immaterial. That's speculation at best. Look, we have all these models over here that say that this is what cancer is, and that is not what it is. So get with the program. Get with the program. Okay, I'll get with the program. I'm a little bit of, this is, I'm a little shocked and slightly beguiled. I thought we were here to uncover the truth. No, you're not here to uncover the truth. You're here to swim with the current, to swim with the tide. When you do that, you get rewarded. There are social perks because you are accepted. You're accepted. You look and appear and act as if you're normal because that is the social norm. And in actuality, your consciousness has been hijacked. And you're nothing but a fucking agent and pawn of the Matrix. And you don't even know it. Because you're so wrapped up in your ability to act and look and appear normal. This is what happens. You remember how normal used to look? Normal used to be the 1950s version of normal. It's not that version anymore. This is what we're up against. It's a consciousness game. And in order to define oneself as an individual, in order to define oneself as an agent that is engaged in the process and act of truth, you must sacrifice being normal. You must sacrifice being accepted. Sorry, it's the way it is. Get used to it. And then what happens is you have the opportunity to meet up with other people. You see, this is happening right here, right now. We're waking up. We're waking up. And they can put any fucking label that they want on us. Hateful, ignorant, whatever. We're waking up. And it's not a waking up that has anything to do with hate or separation, but truth. Sometimes we have to compromise ourselves every now and then because we have to sort of get along in the world. It's not worth it. It's not. State your truth, live your truth. Abide by it. Don't compromise. Trust me. It is not the way to go. So our colleges have become the centers of where Bill Ayers decided to re-educate the masses. Have been for a long time. Now it is hidden. It's no longer hidden in plain sight. It's just in plain sight. I'm going to read you a story here. It's an interesting website called The College Fix. And the story has to do with San Diego State University. The author is Drew Van Voorhees, and it was published yesterday. I'm going to read this to you. Some San Diego State University students are undergoing what organizers acknowledge as a disturbing series of sensory experiences in an attempt to drive out students' prejudicial tendencies and help make them less oppressive. The annual workshop, Journey to a Shared Humanity, isn't that just a nice, warm, cozy, new agey kind of feel to it? It's described on the university's website as a way for organizers, we've heard that term before, to get students to step outside their comfort zone and into the shoes of those who are struggling with oppressive circumstances. This year, some students were required to attend the event as part of their classes. Required. It's not optional. During the experience, students are walked through a darkened multi-purpose room to view a series of theatrical vignettes acted out by campus leaders. For example, in this year's rendition, held earlier this month, students observed skits that included a black man yelling at them to stand against and face the wall and not look at him. This is a San Diego State University. It's what your tax dollars are going towards. California. Let me put this back up here. Sometimes my computer, I get angry at it. But there's more. There's more of this. There's more to the, here we go. Okay. All right, so then he goes on. The performer yelled as if he was a drill instructor. First they came for the Native Americans, but I'm not a Native American, so I did not speak up. Then they came for the Jews, but I am not a Jew, so I did not speak up. Then they came for the gays, but I am not gay, so I did not speak up. Next they came for the crippled, but I am not a crippled, so I did not speak up. Turn around. What do you see? What do you see? There's one light left, one student offered. One light left, one life, my life. When they came for me, there was no one else to speak up. The performer concluded. In another performance, students heard very loud banging and a man's voice yelling, "Ice, open up!" A mother in the scene hurriedly tells her daughter who she is speaking to on the phone that she has to go. Don't let them teach you to be scared of others that don't look or sound like you. Okay, stay quiet and stay put, the mother says. Wait, Mom. Tía mi mucho. Wait, don't go. Don't touch her. Mom. Then the actress stands and faces the students observing in the wings. How would you feel if one of your family members was getting taken away from you? Well, it's happening today. It's happening to me, the performer says somberly at the end of the skit. In another skit, a loudspeaker chants, Jews will not replace us, over and over. The words echoing loudly and eerily through the darkened building. It's the same chant neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville yelled. Then and now images in the background appear to juxtapose images from World War II era Germany and Charlottesville rioters. In another performance, a female says she has a problem with her Middle Eastern roommate because she's a little too foreign. She says her roommate wears a headscarf and that she doesn't feel comfortable sharing a room with somebody who could be related to a terrorist. The overall theatrical experience, which included about a dozen skits, lasts about 20 minutes. Ray Savage, leadership coordinator for the residential education and coordinator for A Journey to a Shared Humanity, told the College Fix that organizers have not received any formal complaints about the program. According to a 2014 Facebook description, the annual workshop, this has been going on for 4 years. Okay, it's not like it's just popped up. The Journey strives to give people a way to experience oppression in a hands-on way. By engaging emotions of the participants, it allows for the accounts in the program to be truly effective. Organizers acknowledge that the annual event's sensory experiences may be disturbing, but adds as an effective tool used to teach people how to feel, how it really feels to be in oppressive situations. Okay, this is the soft reorganization. This is the soft remodel. This is the soft re-education. You think it's harsh, this is soft. After students viewed the immersive live theatrical experience presenting a collective of raw and emotional performances, as has been described, they are taken into a room and debriefed by professors or other campus leaders about how the skits made them feel and what they should do to better combat oppression. So what they do at that point, here's what goes on. They've been traumatized. They've been traumatized. Because a lot of these kids aren't hardened. They just want to get on their cell phones, play games, do Insta chatagram, whatever, right? And then they get taken into a situation like this, and they're traumatized. Then, here come the social engineers, the professors. They come in, and they begin to rewire their heads on the back end of that trauma. Now, you can say, oh, that's just sensitivity training. They're opening them up to other people's experiences. What if the experiences were positive? How about that? What if they were engaged in a series of positive experiences where they were shown how people can be charitable and kind, living by the golden rule, expressing some form of the living gospel, right? You think they would get that? And then you could have the guys sitting there at the end saying, what we tried to do today is to show you that you can be an active participant in life, that you can be an agent of the miraculous, and that love is really a thread that runs through all of our lives. Stay conscious, stay aware, be available. That's the circle of life. No, they go the other route, and they rip their heads apart, and they stick them in a room, and then they re-educate them. This is what's happening. Then you say, well, this is just a small isolated event in San Diego State. No, it's not. There are versions of this that are taking place all across America and have been for decades. And it's been right under our noses, and this is what we're dealing with now as kids come out of college and they have swum with the current and swum with the tide. My heart goes out to the kids going to college today. My heart goes out to the parents who have to pay for their crappy education. Because in our society, you got to have that piece of paper. You got to have that accreditation. I'm an astrologer. I have looked at the evolution of the chart. There's a perfect evolution of the individual with the chart. And we fucked it up. When we come into the body, we breathe our first breath and we have the ascendant, we have the rising sign. And that is what we're going to be learning through for the rest of our lives until we get really good at it. And then we get to bounce off our sun sign and we get to bounce off the ascendant, and they kind of blend together, okay? And each house after that has a specific evolutionary function. You take the first breath, you have will incarnate, even though it is unmanifest in the first house. You get into the second house, and what are you doing? You're learning how to wipe your ass in the second house, essentially. That's what happens. You get to the third house, and then what happens? You get to learn how to talk, and you get to experience language, and you get to experience the other. If you have brothers and sisters, you get to experience them. You get to experience school and early childhood education. And through duality, mostly in school, you get to experience right and wrong. You get to the fourth house, and what do you get? You understand where you're going to be brought up for the next 18 years of your life. It's called your home. And that's where you get your emotional influences. That's where you contact the mother, right? The home, the fourth house. You get on over to that fifth house, and what do you do there? Well, guess what? You figure out there are things that you love. Hobbies, games, passions. You might even fall in love. And out of that fifth house, theoretically, you find something that you love so much that you take it over to the sixth house and you get good at it. You get proficient at it. And you might be even able to make a living out of it. Whoa, how about that? And then once you're able to do that, take care of yourself, and you've got some skills, what can you do after that? You're ready for a relationship because you can take care of yourself. That's the seventh house. You meet somebody. Boom. And then what happens? You jump on over to the eighth house. You consecrate it. You have a baby. Comes out, in the second house. Resources. Physical. Manifestation. And then once you go through that, you have to go through the psychological kind of blending that it takes place when two people, two separate individuals from the seventh house become one in the eighth house. Then where do you go? Well, you go to the ninth house. For what? Religious instruction. How to live. How to have an organizing principle for the rest of your lives. Religious, spiritual, whatever. That's where you go. And then once you get that, then you go to the 10th house. And the 10th house is, guess what? It is the doubling effect. Well, it's not really quite double because I'll be on the 12th house. But it is the doubling effect of the 6th house. Because what you learned how to do to become proficient at it, you take it to the next level in the 10th. And you become an industry leader. Or you run your own business. Or you write your own novel. Whatever that 10th house is. And what happened in life is we cut out the 6th house. And people went from the 5th house all the way to the 9th house, which became colleges and universities. And by so doing that, they cut out the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th house. Very important levels of maturation. And then we shoot our children out into the 10th house in the world, basically programmed by the 9th house, without having any of the gravitas or the maturity that takes place when you go through the chart. There are countries, Israel and Switzerland come to mind, just off the top of my head, where when you get out of high school, you got 2 years of service. You got to be in the IDF, you got to be in the Swiss Guard. And then you can go off and do something. You see, these people figured that out. And they kept that tradition alive. And what happens is that through those 2 years, who do you become dependent upon? You become dependent upon the state, obviously, because they're the ones that are running your life for those 2 years. There are alternative models. And we screwed up the chart. We screwed up the evolutionary process. Because we get our kids, they love this, they love that, and you just shoot them off into that ninth house. Sorry, I'm going off a little bit here. But this is where we are. And these college campuses have become the same centers that Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground had envisioned and imagined back in the 1960s. And while it was hidden in plain sight over the last 30 years, now it is clearly being revealed. This is the revelation of the method. If I had any say over the matter, I would say to my son, go out and work for a little bit. Figure out what you want to do. And then, perhaps, go to college. And this is where we are. We're at a point in time where we are pulling back the curtain on the social engineering. This is where it's at. But here's the problem, the big challenge. And this is what I love the Christian truth community is really interesting in this way, right? Because they'll pull back the curtain and they'll show what's going on. And then they'll say, we have our Lord Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and this is what we lean on. So we've got our organizing principle. We can pull back the curtain and we can show the fallen nature of the world. And that's not a bad thing, except from a spiritual perspective, I think it's great. From an organized perspective, I've always had problems with it. That's just my 2 cents. So, in order for us to not just pull back the curtain and be left with a sense of existential dread, we have to develop our spiritual lives. And it's not easy. It's not always easy. Because ultimately, there is a rejection of the world. You have to reject this world on some level. Because it's false. Even the Hindus talk about it. This is just all, shadow play. Yes, it is a paradox, because if you went out and did something, like you went out and shot somebody, you probably wind up going to jail. Now, how false is that? I mean, it's a pretty real, stark reality, right? I mean, there are some rules of engagement here that do take place. But in order for us to be successful, in order for us to get through and pull this back, we have to at least at some level reject the world. Then we can be in the world and not of it. That's our work. And that's our daily work. It's what we have to do. And it's not always easy. It's not. Sometimes we have events in our lives that show us things. And sometimes they have to do with our own nature and the nature of the world. And when that occurs, that's when the real spiritual growth begins. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. We've been running hot here for the last hour. So I'm going to pull this train into the station. Be back tomorrow, 24 hours from today. By the way, I'm extending my course. Look, if you liked what I just shared with you about astrology and the evolution of the chart, get my course. I got a 16-hour course. You go out right now and you could spend with some other astrologers upwards of $1,500. In some cases, if they decide to do part 1, part 2, part 3, they can string you along for $3,000. Okay, I've got a really solid, rock solid course. I'm taking $50 off of it, and I'm going to do it until Friday. So 2 more days. Go to my website, go to my email address, robertfien@rpm1122zoho.com, and I will work it out with you so that you get the $50 discount on my course. You can learn about what I just shared with you and more, okay? This is a great tool. Trust me. It's a great tool. I also have some reading specials over on my website, and you can check them out as well. All right, that's it for now. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible.